Thank you, Molly and David. They have a fabulous garden, and I love what they've done with their energy, their passion, their creativity. They found their own groove in their garden world, and I thank them very much. I'm Linda Lemusford. I'm producer of Central Texas Gardener, standing in for Tom Spencer today. And like most of you, or all of us out there, I was once a gardener who looked at the yard, and I didn't know what I had in it, didn't know what kind of grass. It was weeds, really, and I didn't know where to get started or what to do. So today I'm joined by an expert, Diana Kirby of Diana's Designs. Diana is a master gardener, a landscape designer, and a garden coach. Really, it is so fabulous to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And so, as a gardener yourself who started, how did you start, first of all?
I started with just a few little annuals in the garden for a little color, and it just grew from there as a passion that developed over the years, and now it's what I do for a living. So I feel very fortunate that I can do that.
Yes. And so what are the things, if you could look back in the Diana that started a few years ago and say, Diana, this is what you need to do first, what would you say to yourself?
I would say for new gardeners, it's important to plan. Even though you may only have a budget to do a small bed or a corner somewhere, think about your whole yard in toto. Think about the trees that you want to put in, what kind of space you want to have. Do you want to have an entertaining space, or do you want to have a quiet place to sit and read a book? Do you have children who need some playroom or dogs that need room to run? Think about what you want to accomplish with your garden, and then do some planning.
The planning is the hardest thing. Even now, and I know better, and I still make the mistake. You get this little tree that's, like this, or this little thing. You really have to look into the future, because you plant this tree, and in 10 years, it's going to be significant shade. And if you wanted to have a vegetable garden, or say you're thinking you were going to have a pool someday, that could be a problem. And so these days it's very easy to find out sizes, especially with Google and Central Texas Gardener's plant list. But what are some of the other things people need to think about? We've got size, but what else?
People need to think about amending their soil so they have good soil for plants to grow in. They need to consider the full size when the plants mature. They also need to look at their sun needs and their water needs and try to group plants together accordingly so that the same plants in the same bed have identical needs so that you can care for them in the same way.
And that sounds so easy, but do you know, recently I met a gardener who's very experienced, actually, and they were still kind of thinking of the lessons their mother maybe had passed along, and the idea of grouping plants by water needs was not really an issue at one time so much, except that if it doesn't need much water and you put it with something that needs a lot of water, it's going to rot.
Right.
And you've always got to be flexible. I know I started out with sun and planted for sunny things, planted my little tree, and now that area's in shade. So you have to be willing to adapt.
You have to plan ahead. It's good to when you do your plan, you can sketch it out on a piece of paper. You can take out a garden hose and line out where you might want to have a bed. Think about things like where the shade is now or where it's going to be in a few years. And think about the plants that you like and what you want to put in there.
The other thing they can do is make drawings, and I love going back to my first little garden diary. That's the other, you're a journalist too, is document every step of the way, because 5 years from now, you may not believe this, but 5 years from now, this is like your family album. I mean, this is as important as a child or a pet, is how your garden grows, and it reflects a lot about you. But I make my kind of sloppy little designs and go out with pots and stuff. What is it that you recommend to really kind of get a better handle of sizing of your space?
Well, it's good to measure. And when you go to your independent nursery, talk to them about how big the plants will get and how plants can be grouped together.
But what you do is take your survey, right? Your house survey.
Right.
And you can kind of do it like that. And so that gives you a better, kind of a better sense of that. And because I know for you, the way you started out was before you were going to have a child, you knew you were going to plant a playscape.
I did. I left room in the landscape for a playscape, and I planned pretty garden beds all around it to kind of soften it and make it attractive for me. But I knew that we needed that playscape in there.
Now, the other thing is people see so many garden designs and they can feel overwhelmed. I know that you recommend, getting pictures out of magazines and other things. You see something that catches your eye, the way you would do for furniture in your interior house. But what is it that they need to think about in the big scheme of it, who they are?
There are a few things that are great to use as guidelines going in. Think about your personal style. Do you like clean contemporary lines? Do you like simplistic minimalist style in your home? Then you might prefer a cleaner look, a more formal look with simple hedges that are trimmed and pruned and things that are more symmetrical. If you like things a little more eclectic or you have a more free-flowing style, you might look at plants that are have long arching branches and flowing feel, or soft grasses that billow in the breeze. You might also be more interested in an asymmetrical style. Instead of straight lines in the beds, you might want a lot of curved lines and natural feel to the space that you develop.
But in either style, or whatever style you prefer, what is it that kind of helps direct your eye? When I started, I was, oh, I want a bunch of this, and I'm gonna have a bunch of that, and we're gonna do this, gonna do that.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you walk out and it's like, where am I going? What direction am I going in? So what do you reckon? What's an inexpensive thing without hiring a landscape architect and doing all that?
It's easy to have a hodgepodge in your garden when you love plants and you like to put them in there. But it's important to think about having a focal point. You can do that very simply and inexpensively with a pretty pot, with a bird bath, or maybe it's even a plant that's a big sculptural plant, like maybe an agave on the corner of a bed, that helps direct the eye, make something a focal point of the garden, and make your landscape bed much more cohesive so that everything works off of each other.
And sometimes this can be as simple as finding something crazy at a thrift store. It doesn't even have to be expensive.
Sure.
And that's where it brings your personality into it.
That's right. It can reflect your personal style. It can be something shabby chic that you pick up at a flea market, or some piece of garden art that you bought in an expensive gallery. I mean, it really depends on whatever your personal taste is to make it your own personal garden.
Now, what do you say about color? Do you like the idea of matching to your house? Do you have one kind of color, like the Gertrude Schikel white garden, or do you just get what you want?
I think you need, again, to think about what you like. You can look to your personal style inside the house, too, and see what really inspires you. But you should consider the style and the color of your house. But there are a lot of different ways to go. You can go with a monochromatic style where you have some of the same hues of the same color to keep it kind of soft and delicate in the garden, or you can have bright pops of color, which look great in our hot sunny gardens here, by looking at a color wheel and looking at the colors that are across from one another on the wheel, or that form a triangle on the wheel, to see which colors work best with one another and show each other's off to their best advantage.
Now, for people who maybe don't want to have a landscape designer, what is a garden coach? What do you do as a garden coach?
When I coach, I go into someone's landscape and I listen to them talk about their goals and their expectations, what kind of style they like, and I help them think about what would look good. Maybe there's a nice spot for a tree over here, or maybe we need some ground cover. I try to help give them a vision of what their garden could be based on what they tell me they'd like to see in their garden. I do a little sketch, I list some plants, I give them information where they can ask personal questions, simple questions that they might not be able to do in a nursery, or information they might not be able to get out of a book.
And then if they wanted to do a landscape design, just very quickly, they can get just a drawing, or they can get design and installation?
They can get a design by itself and do it themselves, and they can do it over time. Or they can have us do the whole installation for them, or even do it in phases. It really depends on each individual person's need and budget.
And how can they get in touch with you?
They can contact me through my website at dianasdesignsaustin.com, or they can check out my blog at sharingnaturesgarden.blogspot.com.
Well, thanks a lot, Diana. You've encouraged me to go out and fix some mistakes in my own garden. But right now, let's check in with our friend, Daphne Richards.